Can you feel the love in the air for this episode of the Just Start the Conversation podcast? It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. We are getting ready to kickstart March. We're a little into 2023 now. We've got 2 months in the books. And one of the things that we were talking about before we started this episode was kind of getting our love lives out of hibernation. Maybe whether you're in a relationship, you're not in a relationship, focusing on the ones that we do have is an important part of everyday life. And certainly relationships can be difficult. And one of the best ways that we can handle those relationships is by communicating with one another. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today with Amie, Allanson, Dundon. As always, good morning, my friend.
Good morning.
Good to talk to you. And the legendary, that's what I've heard, Deb. I'm just saying, the legendary Deb Strauss is joining us. She's a licensed clinical social worker and the clinical lead and psychotherapeutic services there over at St. Luke's. I'm glad I said that all in one breath. Deb, legend, how are you? Good morning.
I'm well, thank you. Good morning.
Very excited to talk to you both because as we've kind of alluded to getting into the start of this episode, relationships can be really difficult. And I feel like, especially in a world of maybe dating apps and a world of maybe the grass may look greener on the other side quite a bit as we're in relationships, getting through relationships, working on them can certainly be a difficult thing. So, Deb, I'm going to go ahead and kickstart with you in this episode. Just can you go into a little bit about the importance of communication between people that are in a relationship with one another?
Communication is the primary foundation on which the relationship is built. If you can't have open discussions with your partner, then it's not going to be you're not going to be able to last very long in that relationship. You have to be able to talk with one another about boundaries and what you like and what you don't like. As far as if Amie likes the Eagles and I like the Steelers, we have to figure out how to work around that. So we're going to have to.
As long as it's not the Cowboys or the Giants or Washington, I think you're pretty good. I think that's pretty good. But I think obviously we're talking about on a very surface level thing there with our football teams. But Amie, just kind of, I feel like that could be a difficult line to toe for people. And it's interesting because that could particularly be in the beginning of a relationship to think if maybe this is a person I can see a future with. Also not necessarily easy if after time people change. You may be a little bit different than the person that your significant other married or were in that relationship with for a long time. So can you just kind of maybe go into, I think that's a good place to start, maybe broaching some of those likes and dislikes in a way that can have an honest conversation, but that also can be productive and not ending with two people just really not liking being around each other.
Yeah, right. I think if I could give the magic pill for that, or cure for how to do that well, I think Deb and I could both retire. But I do think that the word that comes up for me when you're asking those questions is trust. And part of what has to happen as we work on boundaries, like Deb was just saying, is building trust. And if I can't trust my partner, then it's going to be really hard for me to let them know that I'm having feelings about a political candidate, or, I actually don't love the way that they part their hair. Whatever it is, I have to have a level of trust that whatever I say is going to be respected and valued. How do I do that? Honestly, it's a whole lot of learning the difference between being passive, being assertive, and being aggressive. And if I can learn how to be assertive and tell my partner, hey, I really need to sit down and talk with you. I'm really struggling with the way that, you part your hair. I mean, that's a silly example, but we have to own our stuff and be assertive about it and not put blame on the other person. So part of it is, how do I talk to you while I let you know what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, what I need, and leaving room for dialogue and not getting defensive.
Right. I mean, the defensiveness is a huge piece that I see when I'm doing couples counseling with people. And that's when I talk about boundaries. What are the things that you want from your partner? What are the things that you need from your partner? And what are the deal breakers? What are your boundaries? If somebody yells at me, is that something I can tolerate? If somebody says certain words to me, is that something I can tolerate? Or is that a deal breaker? If you continue to do that, then this relationship isn't going to work. So knowing what your boundaries are and being able to accept your partner's boundaries as well.
And yes, and the part of that gets really difficult is that as we age, our relationships age, our needs age, our wants age, and how we communicate has to age with it. We can't expect our partners to be able to handle any changes that I'm going through or changes that I'm making as I age the way that he or she used to or they used to 20 years ago.
Yes.
Definitely.
So, as you mentioned that, it's funny because not too long ago, my wife and I were reading about a celebrity couple that had been separating and started talking about just the idea of being in the limelight, which the vast majority of us are not, but just having all of that out there on social media and people being able to see what's going on with your life. And then we got into talking about dating apps. Now, when my wife and I met, we just kind of missed the rush of the dating app scene. As we're kind of talking about these conversations about how you kind of start, where do you broach? Maybe you are more aggressive in the way that you like to say your feelings or what you're thinking, and maybe your significant other at the time is a little bit more passive, doesn't like confrontation, those sorts of things. Amie, you brought up compared to 20 years ago, and I just want to kind of bring it back to now. Do you think in terms of relationships, maybe we're too quick to flip a script, especially on early relationships, because all of a sudden we're seeing that one thing maybe early on and we say, okay, well, I'll bring up the grass is always greener again, that maybe I've seen this one thing, that's it for me, I'm going to see what else is out there. Do you think that maybe just because there's, I'll use this word loosely, a little more availability out there for people, that maybe there is
so
just
nice.
I tried to do that as gently as I could, that maybe the leash is maybe a little shorter for people than it would have been 20 years ago?
Well, I do think that the flood of social media accessibility has certainly changed our ability to cheat.
It's funny because for those of you who are listening now, you can watch this podcast on YouTube, but as Amie is talking, Deb and Amie are looking at each other and they're both like finishing each other's sentences in their head. Like there's that little smile, like I know where it's going. I know where it's going. Yes, continue, please.
It's so it's very easy to stray when at any second, 24 hours a day, you can click a button and connect either in texting, in blogging, in pictures, in emails, in chats that go around the world 24 hours a day. It's very easy to stray. So I think it's harder in that sense to maintain a committed relationship.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And Deb, do you find that's something that you're seeing a lot? You had mentioned about couples therapy earlier that, what I might think is not physically cheating, but is maybe emotionally cheating. My partner might say, look, I've known this girl since college. We talk all the time. I don't need to change that. Nothing's ever happened with this person. Is that something that you're finding is probably something that's been more relevant in, couples therapy in recent years?
Absolutely. The amount of people that come in and talk about their partner being on Facebook and who they're friends with on Facebook and who they're liking on Facebook. Oh, he liked, 5 pictures of hers. And so I don't really want him to be friends with her on Facebook anymore because I think that he's having an emotional affair or maybe a physical affair. And people are really scrutinizing what they're seeing on social media with their partners. Some of them are cheating, some of them are not. So it becomes, is this a control issue, which is a lack of communication, or is this a cheating issue, which is a lack of communication. So they're really not communicating face to face. They're communicating by looking at what the other person is doing on social media. So it's really an interesting phenomenon.
But you know what I would argue, and I do argue this with clients and with friends, that, you know, if my partner is liking, that's such a weird.
It really is. It's really weird to like say
verb.
It. Yeah.
Right.
If they're liking somebody else's picture, I'm actually going to receive the benefit of that on my end, because my partner is being is having a more robust social life, and is probably happier that he's interacting with more people and looking at different things. And it doesn't mean that I'm not the person that they're coming home to.
Right.
Right.
And that's where the communication's important.
Right.
If I could say to my partner, I noticed that you're interacting with this person a lot. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
And have a discussion with them.
Right. It's okay. That person's coming home to you for the
Right.
most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in your perspective. If I come into couples therapy and my significant other and I are talking, and I say, you know, I don't like that she likes X, Y, or Z. And she says to me, well, I don't see that being a problem. And I say, come back and say, okay, well then I would like to be able to look through your phone whenever I want, kind of on an occasion. Are we seeing the chuckle came from both of you, so I know I'm going in a good direction. We keep bringing up this word trust, and it's obviously got a deep definition. You can kind of take it in any kind of way you want to, but as two people who talk to couples, is there a point where maybe you as professionals will step in and say, like, that's great. If you want to give up your phone, great. If you want to look at the phone, fine. But this isn't, you know, we're trusting each other, but are we really trusting each other? So I guess my question is kind of where does the line, the boundary happen, and where do we actually say this really isn't a healthy way of doing business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have that discussion so many times with people. And that's where I talk about, what do you want in your relationship? And everybody says, I want a trusting relationship. Well, if your partner needs to look at your telephone, that's not a trusting relationship. If they're looking at your phone to see who you've been speaking with, and it's not really an accurate way of finding out whether or not your partner is cheating on you. They can easily communicate with people in a different way if they know you're going to be looking at their phone. So you have to have that trust to be able to say, my partner is going to be coming home to me. And if they choose not to for some reason, then that's probably not the right relationship for me.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's so funny because my advice is the same to people that come in and say, I really, or I sat down last night and after John went to bed, I went through his phone. And that is never okay. Mm-hmm. In my book, because it does violate every boundary, every sense of trust. Right. If I haven't talked it out first and gotten permission.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, these phones just getting everybody in trouble.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, so let's say this. We've kind of taken a look at the I don't want to say negative, but like maybe relationships where there's emotional cheating, physical cheating. Mm-hmm. Want to kind of turn into something more positive that is definitely a vulnerability for all of us, and that's talking about love. Maybe sometimes somebody is a little more ready to drop that L word than others are ready to do so. So can we talk about that in a relationship? Just look, any of these conversations we have, they're not easy conversations, whether you think your partner is doing X, Y, or Z, whether you think you're in love. We've got other places we're going to go in this conversation as well. But just, can we kind of go into a little bit of, that's not an easy thing to, especially if early on you're the person that's just, I don't want to use infatuated because maybe that feels like it goes a little too far, but you're feeling the butterflies way more than somebody else is. Deb, I'll start with you. Kind of just the maybe a soft landing on the word love, where you're kind of maybe a way that you're saying, this is what I'm feeling, maybe not quite saying it, but just a way to kind of get to that point to telling your partner, you're someone I'm serious about, and this is something that I think I want to continue to try to work on and grow.
I think you just said it. I think that's exactly
how you just start the conversation podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's about opening up that conversation and saying, I feel like this is a relationship that could go further. How are you feeling? And then letting that other person share how they're feeling. I think it can be as easy as that, as being able to say, I enjoy doing this with you. I enjoy going on a hike with you. Can we go on another hike next week? And talking about the things that you have in common, talking about the things where you differ a little bit, and really just building off of that and having those conversations about, where do you see this going?
And I also think the L word is okay. I think it's okay to tell somebody you love them. You know, I think we get hung up on, oh my God, he told me he loved me. I'm running. I'm not ready for that.
Right.
And love to all of us means something a little bit different, probably.
Yeah.
And if I feel like I love you, even forget the intimate relationship as a friend, it's important to say I love you.
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
Life is too short. And if there are relationships that come into my world, they're in my world for a reason, whether intimate or friend or whatever. If I love somebody, if I really like somebody, it's okay to say that. I can't control how that other person reacts to that L word.
Right.
I can only control myself. Certainly, Crockett, we've gone places on this podcast that are next level in terms of when is too much, and when do you take it too far? And you said infatuation, and there's love bombing, and there's all sorts of like yuckier kind of feeling love stuff. But if this is a normal, like, hey, we're dating and I really like you, I kind of think I might even love you, go for it. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and I agree with you, especially on the look. I was just my buddy's daughter had her 3-year-old birthday yesterday. I tell my buddies anytime I walk out the door, I love them. Family, anytime I'm walking out the door, I love you. Be safe. Get to where you're going, doing what you're doing. When there is that extra level of intimacy, you've seen each other in ways that perhaps a lot of other people haven't seen that other person. There is a little bit more of a vulnerability to saying, I love you there, though. Wouldn't you say that there is more to it that suggests, you know, that I might want you to be, not that other people are in a serious part of your life, but that you are the one, you know, that I will, not so specifically, but that we've chosen one another to do this thing called life together. There is a little bit more. I completely agree. Tell people you love them anytime you can, but especially that first time, somebody new, maybe it's only been a couple of months and you're thinking, I really feel this way. It is okay to maybe feel like now is not the time to drop that word. Isn't that, do you think that's fair?
I think that's fine. I think you have to go with your gut, and you can feel when it's the right time to say it to somebody. If you have a hesitation, then you need more conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. And just because you have become physically intimate with someone doesn't mean you have to tell them you love them. So, you know, vice versa.
Sure.
We've gone ahead and we've been connected on that physical level. That doesn't require an I love you if you're both consenting.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
Sure. Man, that gut just gets in the way all the time, doesn't it? Just you trust in your gut. Just go. That thing will be there for you. Well, listen. Okay, so look at our relationship, our fictitious relationship that we're having here. Grow. You've fallen in love. Things change over time. Our opinions change over time. What we may like or dislike may change over time, and certainly, if you're in a relationship for a long time, what in moments of intimacy, perhaps what you maybe liked before might not be something you like now, and maybe perhaps something that you weren't really thinking about before is something you're thinking about now. So I feel like, man, that word intimate keeps coming back up here because I feel like that's just the next level of conversation with someone. And certainly, if it's somebody that you've been with, it can be very difficult to once again make yourself vulnerable and again come out and say, hey, this isn't really working for me anymore from an intimate space. Can we maybe try to, for lack of a better word, explore some other things out there, and vice versa? Maybe it could be that one of the major attractions or things that brought you together were some very intimate things in the beginning that aren't necessarily on the docket anymore for some people. So can we kind of go into having some of those conversations? Because you would think, especially if somebody's been married for a while, hey, I know this person really well. Where the heck all of a sudden is this coming from? Can you just kind of go into some of, Deb, I'll start with you here. Maybe just sometimes the conversations that you hear, or how you maybe would address people to kind of broach how they want to maybe make a change, particularly when it comes to intimacy.
It's interesting. I have these conversations a lot more in individual sessions than I do in the couple sessions to start with. And I think that it's because an individual, we have, certainly not on a sexual level, but we have more intimacy between me and my client on an emotional level. So we can get into those discussions. As people are aging, they have different health issues coming up. They have different, levels of libido that might be changing over the years. And so we have these discussions, and I talk with my clients about, okay, have you talked to your partner? Oh, no, I can't do that. All right, let's talk about how you can start that conversation. Let's talk about different things that you can do, different ways that you can be first emotionally intimate with your partner, and then transition that to physical intimacy and trying some different things. You have to have that emotional intimacy and ability to, again, communicate with them about what you're feeling and what's going on in your body.
Yeah.
I kind of want to talk about maybe where the line might be between intimacy and love. We'll kind of bring those two things together because, we kind of alluded not long period of time ago about how maybe somebody falls head over heels. And maybe part of that is what's happening in your sex life with your intimacy, things of that nature. And maybe for someone that this isn't their long-term plan, they might not have a long-term plan. Just kind of that fine line between intimacy and love. And we're going to keep coming back to communication, of course, but just the vulnerability that's there in knowing the difference between the two, talking about the difference between the two. Amie, I can kind of see your pot stirring a little bit over there as you're thinking about it. Just kind of the difference in intimacy and love and trying to communicate that way with one another.
Yeah, I think my pot is stirring because my instinct is to say that they're two different things. I think in my experience, one can be very intimate with somebody and not love them. And one can love somebody very much and not be physically, sexually intimate.
Right. I think there's a difference between sex and intimacy.
Yes. Yeah. The intimacy for one couple, it may mean doing the crossword puzzle together on a Sunday morning,
right,
and drinking coffee and watching the birds.
Right.
And intimacy to another couple may mean going to some sort of nightclub or swing club or whatever it means for them. It's so different for everybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I was talking about being in an individual session with somebody and me and that person having a level of intimacy, it's that trust.
Yeah.
Because clearly we're not in a relationship, we're not in a friendship, we're not in a sexual relationship, we're in a therapeutic relationship, which is a real relationship that has intimacy in it because that person trusts me, I trust them, and we have this back and forth. That's, to me, much different than a sexual relationship that doesn't have that level of trust and that level of connection.
Yeah. And I feel, Crockett, like you're almost saying like love and intimacy for you mean something much more similar. And for us, I feel like there's a much greater divide.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, that intimacy, when I think intimacy, I think sex is the first thing that comes to my mind, versus that kind of just emotional element of the, I mean, I guess I don't know how else to put it other than the emotional intimacy. So where do we kind of, and I'm sure there's probably couples that look at intimacy the exact same way, where somebody may be emotionally fulfilled by something one person is doing. The other one says, that's great, but I find that how do I, again, I'm trying to find the perfect way of putting this. I embrace that more when it's a sexual nature. Like, I feel the closest to you in this moment, where you might feel it emotionally and in acts of kindness or things that may come your way. So just how can we, man, it's just so tough to, again, that's the whole point of these conversations, right? But just finding those boundaries that we each can kind of meet in the middle and say, hey, I'm an acts of kindness person, I'm an acts of sexual intimacy person.
And Crockett, we call that love language, right? What's your love language? You know, is it physical touch? Is it gifts?
Right.
Is it words? You know, we all have a different love language. Hopefully, if you're with somebody in a committed relationship, you have similar love languages. It helps, or at least helps if you know your person's that you're with, their love language, so that you can give them what they need. For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
For couples, so I guess I'll kind of turn into this then. So for couples that feel emotionally intimate, but both feel like there maybe is something missing sexually in their life, it's you know, we kind of go through, I'll use a word, ruts. You're with somebody for a long time, maybe the kids are always up at night when you're just trying to how can we, that can be very frustrating for couples, and particularly it happens one person gets a little more frustrated than the next person. So can we just kind of go into the there's a lot more, I think there's a lot more involved in sexual fulfillment than there is maybe with emotional fulfillment. I certainly don't want to discredit emotional fulfillment, but there's a lot more activity that probably needs to happen for sexual fulfillment. So can we kind of go into, that's going to be a tough conversation for couples, especially if maybe you were one way when the relationship started and now not moving as quickly as you used to. Can we kind of go into just trying to have those conversations?
Go ahead.
Okay, I thought that you had something that
No,
you
go
had
ahead.
to say. I talked to my couple clients about finding their time for themselves and doing date nights, you know, whatever that looks like for them. For some people, it might be going out and having a nice dinner and going to the movies. For others, it might be having the kids go to their grandparents' house and having a stay in the house, movie night, camp in the living room, something fun that's a little bit different, so that they can rekindle that spark that they had before and they have some alone time. Parents need alone time. Just because you've had kids doesn't mean that you don't need that connection anymore.
Yeah. And I think, yes, period. And I think that it's important to ask your partner what he or she or they need, as at every stage of, like, a lot, so that when the kids are 0 to 2, it's going to be a different, because people are a whole different level of tired, right? When kids are 0 to 2 than they are when kids are 10 to 15. So it's checking in all the time and saying, what do you need? What can I do for you? And maybe it's as simple as, you know, tonight I'm going to draw a bath for you, and I'm going to give you a half an hour with low lights and bubbles and music by yourself, because I know then that you're going to be recharged for the next night, and we can maybe do something a little bit more physical. So it's it's certainly kind of knowing your partner and anticipating their needs too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how often, as you both are talking to couples, how often does it just come back to your love language? How often does it come back to
every day
acts of service or, well, yeah, but I mean, when couples are, first of all, and Amie, you know, I've said this a bunch of times in this podcast. I think everyone should talk to therapists, because I think whether you think you've got stuff on your mind or not, you probably do, and probably stuff that you should dig into a little bit. Couples in particular, I think, especially if you are feeling that, I come back to that word rut. But if you do feel like maybe you're sputtering in the water a little bit, you both have seen, I'm sure, tons of couples out there. How often does it really come back to those love languages, and how can we help people embrace them, where one person might be acts of service, where one person has just, I don't want to say doesn't care about physical touch, but you know, maybe making an effort to just kiss each other in the kitchen a little bit more. And maybe over here it's Amie, like you said, like, just give me a half hour to take a bath and not have some 2-year-old's fingers creeping under the door. Just let me know that I can have that 30 minutes to listen to what I want to listen to and just hang out. How often do you find that really that is, when we get down to the nuts and bolts of communication, that really is the foundation of making it work?
I think it's almost every time it's about the communication and figuring out what the other person likes or wants. And one of the things that we focus on is knowing that you can't read the other person's mind. If the other person's love language is touch, but they've never told you that they really want touch, well, they should know. They're my partner. You know, I've been with them for 20 years. They should know that that's what I like. Have you ever told them? No.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
So I think it comes up a lot where people haven't shared what they need from their partner.
Sometimes it's and sometimes we have to help our partner out, right? And it's okay for me to say to my partner, what do you need?
Yeah.
What do you need today? What can I do for you? What would help?
Yeah.
You know, it's easier for some people to say it if we ask. So don't be afraid to ask your partner what they need, you know, what you can do for them, because then that'll help them feel maybe more free to discuss what that is. And then don't get defensive when they tell you that they need alone time without you.
That's the hard part, right?
Right.
Don't get defensive. That's the hard part.
Sure.
Right.
And I think, you know, I don't think it needs to necessarily be said, but I think as we get older and say kids or pets or family life or work is more intense when you're 35 than 25 or 45 than 35. That ultimately changes your own love language a little bit. That maybe says, hey, earlier when we were younger, maybe it was physical touch, but now we have a couple of kids, and if you could just take the kids to the park and give me an hour by that speaks the same way that a physical touch did to me when I was in my 20s. So we do have to give ourselves the grace of knowing that we are evolving creatures. We're not exactly the same person we were a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. But I guess that kind of leads me into my next point. And there are unfortunately times when relationships come to an end where both people say, or one person in particular maybe feels like, you know, this we've tried and tried and tried, and this isn't the way it's going to be for us going forward. I kind of have a twofold question here, and Deb, I'll start with you. We opened this conversation in talking about, you know, maybe being too quick to judge early in a dating situation, too quick to judge. The ability to quote unquote make it work, which I think may have a negative connotation to it, because it sounds like no one wants to call their relationship work. But in the reality, I think if you ask a lot of couples who have been together for, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, whatever it is, they're going to tell you it's work. They're going to tell you that it's not always these perfect rose petals on the bed and a heart shape and all those things, that it takes work. So for my twofold question, Deb, I'm going to say, do you find that I guess in this kind of new age of dating and all those things that we kind of alluded to, do you find that maybe couples maybe aren't trying as hard to make it work as they historically have? And listen, there are something, if it's from just an emotional standpoint of we've kind of emotionally outgrown each other. Obviously, there's other circumstances and why people separate, some that are very, very serious and reasons why you particularly need to even get away from that other person. But as we talk about making it work, can we also talk about that it's maybe okay to go separate ways? Of course, there's this public connotation and there's family and there's all those things, but what it is to kind of give to ourselves and maybe for that person to give to themselves to say, look, for a lack of a better phrase, we had a good run. We aren't the same people we were before, and it's okay to move on and go in a different direction.
Yeah. And I do think that that's okay. I see most people who come in for couples therapy wanting to try to make it work. One of the first questions that I ask is I ask each partner separately, what is your commitment to this relationship? So that I can gauge where each one is, because they might be at different places and we need to start with that. But I see a lot of people really trying to make it work and often beyond the point where they should probably, where it's becoming physically or emotionally detrimental to them, or physically and emotionally detrimental to their children who are observing this relationship happening. So I think that working with a therapist or, having those conversations in couples therapy might help to tease that out. Is this something that's fixable, or is this something that has gone to the point where it's becoming detrimental to the health and mental health of the family?
Yeah. I think we need to look at situations where there's domestic violence, interpersonal violence, intimate partner violence, physical violence due to drug or alcohol use. There's a myriad of reasons why sometimes, I think always physical safety has to be the number one thing that we get a really good reading on before we start working on a relationship. Yeah. If one partner or the other does not feel safe, then we need to find a way to help them create safety. Number one. So don't feel like if you're in a relationship and you are feeling abused physically, sexually, emotionally, verbally, that's the first thing you need to address.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And there, I've seen relationships where there has been interpersonal violence and they've worked through it in a really healthy way and they've made a lot of positive changes and it was able to work. But it takes a whole lot of dedication on both sides, which is why Deb just said, you need to know where the starting point is for both of those people.
Right.
To kind of know how we move together when we're at very different points. And sometimes folks that are abusive don't even realize they're abusive. So that there's a whole lot of work on the background that has to get done first.
Okay, so I think a good spot, maybe that was, we don't want to end on a separation. Let's end on a positive note here, kids. So okay, we've got a couple that comes to you both and says, we want to make it work. We love each other. We know we love each other. We're just stuck in this spot right now. Let's say it's not even on the couch behind you. Let's say it's a friend is coming to you and just saying, I'm in this relationship. I know that they care about me. What is kind of the baseline thing that you would want to say to somebody that comes into you and says, I really want to make this work with somebody. I think they want to make it work with me. We're both trying to find a way to do it. We've been through so much already. We know that we can get through this. Just kind of that first putting our toe in the water of trying to keep this thing going forward. What would you say for either of you is kind of your first point that you would want to make? Amie, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I always like to start in situations like that and say, write out your list of a couple things. The top 10 things your partner does that shows you they love you. And then you're going to share that with them. Because oftentimes things that are ways that you feel loved and shown love by your partner aren't even things they realize they do. Like it might be, well, he takes out the trash and he empties the dishwasher and he folds my socks the way I like.
But enough about me. Let's talk about the rest of the conversation. Enough about me. Enough about me.
There you go. So, and then I say, and what are the things that you're willing to do to keep this relationship going? And it's important to, again, it comes right back to communication. Where we start is where we end. I have to let somebody know what's working well as much as I tell them what's not working well. Yes. And too often we're very quick to say, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. Yeah. Talk about what's right.
Yeah. What I appreciate about you, what I really love about you, rather than you didn't finish the dishes that were in the sink, saying, I really appreciate that you made the bed this morning. So really kind of looking at those positives.
I think for me, one of the things that I've always tried to be, I've always been, I think, a cup half full kind of guy. And one of the things that I've always tried to tell myself in any situation that's been difficult is just, if you kind of focus on the little things, if you take care of the little things, that big picture will take care of itself. And I think to the point that you both just made, maybe if we focus on those little things about our partner in a positive way, not the negative ones, if we focus on the positive ones that say, man, doesn't it feel nice every once in a while to get up from your desk if you're working from home and go in the kitchen and see that the sink is empty or that the trash has been taken out? It's those things that, if you can kind of focus on those little things and you both want to be there, you both care, you both want to be with one another, maybe that is the best place to start, is by focusing on those little things that can, whether it's just make your day a little bit easier, make you smile. Maybe they left you your favorite candy bar on the counter just because they ran out to the store and were thinking about you. Maybe that's the best place to start. And that's actually where we're going to wrap this one up here today, my friends. So thank you to Deb Strauss, a licensed clinical social worker. She's the clinical lead of psychotherapeutic services over there at SLUHN. So Deb, anytime you want to jump on board, you just let Amie or Jody or Lisa know, and we would love to have you back. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Amie, as always, just a delightful conversation with you. I know you're going to miss me as much as I miss you until our next episode.
I will. And next episode, just a little teaser, we're going to get deeper into the psychopathology of some people and some folks. So it'll be an interesting true crime second episode next time.
Again, for those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, as Amie was saying, that her eyes were squinting a little bit as she was getting ready to tell us about what could be coming up in our next episode of the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It is brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. For Amie, Allanson, Dundon, and Deb Strauss, and Lisa back there, I can see you back there too. For Lisa Johnson, my name is Kevin Crockett. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Just Start the Conversation podcast.